Russia begins to evacuate Herzen as an attack by Ukraine to recapture the city appears imminent.
Support grows in Finland for the construction of partial border fencing along its frontier with Russia.
The Russian authorities have begun a mass evacuation of civilians from Herzen. The Ukrainian push to recapture the city is imminent, and it's a key moment for both sides. Winter is approaching and their positions will soon remain mostly frozen until the spring. The authorities say these evacuations are voluntary, but in many cases the only routes out are to Russia.
Organized efforts to relocate residents to the other bank of the Dnipro River are underway in Herzen. A ferry service is now available to take people from the port of Herzen to Oleszki and Hola Pristan, where a temporary accommodation point has opened. Rescuers will guide the direction of the trip. It will be chosen based on the desire of the person themselves.
Back in February, Herzen was one of the first major cities to fall to the Russians. But on Wednesday, in a response to a series of military setbacks, President Putin announced the imposition of martial law in the 4 territories he's annexed.
Before joining the Russian Federation, the Donetsk Popular Republic, Luhansk Popular Republic and the region of Herzen and Zaporizhia were de facto living under martial law. So now it just has to be formalized according to Russian legislation. That's why I signed a decree introducing martial law in those 4 subjects of the Russian Federation. I will immediately send it to the Federation Council for approval.
Whilst parts of Ukraine, such as here in recently liberated Kupiansk, begin to recover from occupation, others remain under almost constant attack. And across Ukraine, energy and water supplies are being threatened as strikes reach far into the country and damage key facilities.
Hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians in more than 1,000 settlements did not have power following Russia's attacks on critical infrastructure, according to Ukraine's Ministry of Energy. The head of the European Commission called these strikes, quote, the acts of pure terror that amount to war crimes. The head of Kryvyi Rih's military administration, Alexander Vilkul, said Russia launched rocket fire overnight on an energy facility, causing serious destruction in his region. Ukrainian forces also shot down 13 drones over Mykolaiv overnight, according to the region's governor Vitaly Kim. Zaporizhia was also attacked overnight, with Russia firing on critical infrastructure in a village, according to the regional governor Alexander Staruch. Energy infrastructure has been hit in Vinnytsia region on Wednesday. The Institute for the Study of War says Russian forces have directed dozens of Iranian-made drones against civilian targets in Ukraine since mid-September, prioritizing creating psychological terror effects on Ukrainian civilians rather than achieving tangible battlefield effects. In northeast of Ukraine, Russian troops conducted a limited ground attack in northern Kharkiv region, seemingly suggesting that Russian forces may retain territorial aspirations in this area despite massive losses during the recent Ukrainian counter-offensive operation. In the south of Ukraine, in the region of Herzen, Russian sources stated that Ukrainian forces continued counter-offensive operations across the entire front line in Herzen region, targeting Russian ground lines of communication and ammunition depots in central Herzen region. Russian authorities are struggling to cope with their reduced logistics capacity through Crimea following the attack on the Kerch Strait bridge.
Is this your last Prime Minister's questions? Is it time to resign? Aren't you leading a coalition of chaos?
Embattled UK leader Liz Truss faced difficult questions even before she arrived at Parliament on Wednesday to face her first Prime Minister's question since making a dramatic U-turn on tax cuts. Once in the chamber, she wasn't able to avoid answering.
I've got the list here. 45p tax cut, gone. Corporation tax cut, gone. 20p tax cut, gone. 2-year energy freeze, gone. Tax-free shopping, gone. Economic credibility, gone. And her supposed best friend, the former Chancellor, he's gone as well. They're all gone. So why is she still here?
Mr. Speaker, I am a fighter and not a quitter. interest to make sure that we have economic stability.
Prime Minister.
Liz Truss's plans to grow the economy by lowering taxes fell apart after they caused chaos on the financial markets, resulting in the sacking of her newly appointed Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng. But her critics say the policies he announced were hers, and even some of her own backbenchers think her position as Prime Minister is untenable.
The energy price guarantee.
British Prime Minister Liz Truss has said she's a fighter and not a quitter at Prime Minister's questions at Parliament. Truss is currently polling with the lowest approval rating of a Prime Minister ever. She was forced to U-turn on her promises to cut tax for high earners after sparking market turmoil. Despite trying to correct the economic plans, mortgage payers are still facing higher rates because of her moves. Well, with me now is Adam Schwartz, a political commentator. Adam, thanks so much for taking the time. This, of course, was Liz Truss's big moment to convince that she was back in control. Did she manage it?
Well, I think certainly she performed better than some had expected after the very dire news conference they held just a few days ago. So I think expectations were particularly low. So I don't think it was disastrous, but I don't think it was a particularly great performance, really. However, I don't think it really changes the kind of fundamentals of the situation that she's in. You know, at the moment, she's a leader that really is without credibility, without authority, and without any kind of democratic legitimacy. And I think at the moment, you know, most governments midway through their terms are simply planning, you know, in terms of months or years. But actually, this is a government that's trying to cling on really on a day-to-day, moment-by-moment basis. So I think she's probably done enough in terms of trying to buy herself a little bit of time, hopefully, you know, in terms of trying to get to October the 31st for the fiscal statement. But certainly I don't think it really has changed the fundamental situation that she's facing, which is a very premature end to her premiership, only 43 days into taking the job.
It did appear in Prime Minister's questions that there was another U-turn as well when it came to pensions. And she could have potentially undermined her Chancellor there, who, of course, she needs Jeremy Hunt's support and the support of her cabinet. So do you think that could be problematic for her?
I think from a sort of technical point of view, obviously, you know, one side or the other will come out supreme. And obviously, you know, she is reliant upon the support of Jeremy Hunt in terms of trying to survive and maintain a cohesive cabinet. But I think really what the major significance of it is that it really shows that this is not a government that has sort of a very cohesive approach. And even though it's trying to sort of turn a new leaf in terms of trying to set a new policy trajectory, actually it's still having problems in trying to manage messages and also trying to manage just basic policy going forward. So I think, you know, it's possible that she was simply trying to assert authority following a few days where authority seemed to sap away from her towards her new Chancellor. But I think from a political perspective, it doesn't look very good. But also from a sort of economic and fiscal perspective, potentially this may be an issue going forward, having to raise pensions by 10% when already after the U-turns the government remains £38 billion you know, in sort of a shortfall. So I think certainly from a political perspective it's difficult, but also from an economic perspective and a fiscal perspective it looks very difficult for her as well.
Finland has moved a step closer to approving the construction of a fence along parts of its border with Russia. Prime Minister Sanna Marin says there is a growing cross-party support, which has gained traction since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Helsinki is concerned over a possible large-scale and illegal cross-border migration. Finland shares with Russia the longest border of any EU member, and wants the main section of the proposed fence on its southeast, where most border traffic takes place.
We want to ensure that we have sufficient support for our border guard force to carry out effective and appropriate border control. In addition, we need to be prepared for any disruptive situations.
Between 130 and 260 kilometres of partial fencing is proposed along Finland's 1,300-kilometre border with Russia. Many Russians have fled their country due to Moscow's call for a partial mobilization of more troops. The cost is estimated to run into the hundreds of millions of euros, and construction would take place in the next 3 to 4 years.